Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show helping men to open up about manhood. My name is Simon Rennie and my aim is to get men talking. From mental health to fatherhood and everything in between, Mindful Men creates a safe space for conversation. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to say a huge thank you for joining me. It means a world for you to join me and talk about men's issues. And if you love what you hear, please subscribe and share the episode with your mates. You can also join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube, and I'd love to connect with you there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rennie, and today we're getting mindful about disability. And helping me talk about disability, we've got Perry Cross and Vitori Buatava from the Gold Coast. How you going, guys?
G'day, Simon.
How you going, Simon?
Very well.
I'm really looking forward to this episode of the Mindful Men podcast because the last 4 years I've worked in the disability space and I've heard lots of different and inspiring stories around disability and perseverance and strength. So, Perry, you have got one pretty significant story that I'd love to share with my audience today. Now, to introduce you, you're a Spinal Research Ambassador and you've got the Perry Cross Spinal Research Foundation. You're also the founding director and CEO of Accessible Housing Australia, which is a specialist disability accommodation provider. So some fantastic work there in itself. And Vitori, you're the owner of Care Match Australia, which is an in-home support for people living with disability. Now, Perry, I'll start with you and a bit about you and where you grew up and I guess life before 19, because I understand 19 is when you had your injury. So yeah, a little bit about, are you from the Gold Coast or did you move to the Gold Coast? Tell us a bit about life before 19.
No, I was born on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. So it's sort of, people try and claim me as a New South Wales supporter, but I'm not. I'm a Queenslander. And I moved to the Gold Coast when I was a little kid, so I've only really known, the majority of my life growing up on the Goldie and, enjoying the wonderful lifestyle that it offers. Playing with mates at the beach, surfing, playing sport, going to school, just the normal sort of childhood. And at the age of 19, just 2 years out of school, I was injured playing rugby union. I was injured in a ruck at Ballymore in Brisbane, and then I suffered a spinal cord injury. And I remember that moment, vividly, going from an able-bodied active person to someone sort of laying there on the ground, unable to move, unable to feel, and thinking, oh my God, something terrible's just happened, and how can I go back and fix it? And you can't. And, you basically have to deal with what life throws at you in an instant, from every moment going forward. So there's no sort of subtle way to have a spinal injury. It's very brutal injury in terms of the nature of it, but also the psychological side of it. You can't really counsel into a spinal injury. It's so brutal that you have to deal with all the emotions, endless amounts of emotion, sort of straight away. And so it was a tough period in my life. That was a long time ago now, but it's given me some good mental strength and all those sort of qualities in life to go forward with. So
yeah, and so do you remember when the injury happened? Like, do you remember lying on the ground and thinking, oh shit, something's gone wrong, or did you wake up in hospital? Like, what was those next few moments like for you?
Yeah, no, it was pretty sort of surreal moment because you're awake. I was conscious of the whole thing, and it's not traumatic as in like there's no blood. It's not awful sort of scene. It's actually pretty calm in the sense that lying there and that you just can't move and feel. It's a dramatic thing with people around you to see it happening because when you start to realise that this is paralysis, this person's never going to get up again, and he'll never walk again. And my mates who were on the field at the time, a lot of friends were there at the game, which makes it even worse. That it impacts your whole social group. They've got to deal with it too, So, and then I was transferred to hospital like straight away. The hospital was 800 metres down the road, so it wasn't far to get to the hospital, but it takes time to stabilise a patient and then be moved. And I had surgery that night. went into surgery and sort of never regained consciousness for another few days. And I remember waking up thinking, where am I? Why am I strapped to this bed? And so you're not strapped to the bed, you're paralysed. And then, I couldn't talk, couldn't eat. I was on life support. There's all these crazy things that you've never been exposed to going on in your life, and you're in the middle of this, what feels like a movie, trying to comprehend it. Still sometimes don't comprehend it. It's all happened, you think back and go, wow, that feels like another life.
And so how quickly, like from the surgery, you had the surgery that night, and then how quickly did you realise how significant it was? Was it pretty quick, or did it take a few days to sink in, or?
Well, it takes, a few days to come to in terms of because I was sort of heavily sedated, all those sort of things.
Mm.
And then I remember slowly coming to and seeing people around me and talking and walking around, and so you're sort of just gradually coming into conscious state of awareness. My family were there, friends and that. And I don't think you really have a moment of waking up, but you gradually sort of come to terms with what's happening, and you grasp the situation. You keep asking, is this really happening? Questioning what's going on, so many questions. And I remember, thinking well, I'm going to go back to work on Monday, this is going to be a massive inconvenience. It'd never get back to normal. And that's what's weird. Life never get back to that point in your life where you go back to work on Monday, it all ends. And life goes off in this other direction that is just so profoundly different to anything you've ever known, because there's this whole sector and industry of, what we call disability and spinal cord injury and wheelchairs and, all this stuff and things in this world that you've never been exposed to, which is normal. I have a whole new group of friends, and still have, the same old group of friends, but I have new friends in different walks of life, so to speak, that are spinal injuries, provide support and all that sort of stuff. There's this new world, and it's emotional and it's tough, and I can't really give it context because it's so profound that you just can't even put it into words probably.
Yeah. Now, this happened when you were 19, and without giving your age away, I'm assuming it's before the NDIS.
Long time before the NDIS.
Yeah.
I'm in my 40s, so I've been injured over 20 years. And, the world was different back then. There was a state-based system of support, and there was not a lot of choice and control. The supports that, were out there, and people turned up at your house, and it's like, wow, how does this work? Some stranger cruising around the house, they can help you do things, and what's going on, How the good old days. But it worked, make a long story short, I, learned to eat again, talk, and obviously got discharged from hospital and back home to my parents' home and trying to get back into life. And I found that I didn't know what I was ever going to do, and life felt pretty hopeless. And I had some friends going to university because I was 19, and I was like, well, maybe I was enrolled at uni, I had looked at a few courses, enrolled myself in university, and just went to uni with my mates and friends for a social sort of experience. And then I started to realise that, you can get an education. But it gave me some sort of direction and purpose in life. I was just doing it because I was sort of maybe bored and lost and didn't feel like I had a place in society. And I wanted to be part of the community. So I felt like university was an obvious place for me to go. And I was lucky that I went to Bond University on the Gold Coast, and they were supportive enough to make sure that I could get the notes from the lecturers, and my tutors were helpful and all that sort of stuff that enabled me to be to take part. I think that made a lot of difference. They were a small university at the time, and they were accommodating.
Yeah. What did you study at uni?
Surprisingly enough, communications, marketing. And that helped me, career-wise. When I worked out what I wanted to do, it gave me the skills and understanding that I needed to be able to go and, do bigger and better things with my life. And, I'm a C2 ventilated quadriplegic. That's the book term. But it doesn't define the way I've operated in terms of business and life. And it's just been a bit of a story to tell along the way, I suppose.
Yeah. And for the next 25 years, I understand you're living between your parents and your sisters and your brother's house, because I guess specialist disability accommodation, was that really a thing back then or not so much?
No, mate, like the most recent house I was living in, it was with my brother, and it was a old Queenslander, classic sort of old fire trap, with a big ramp up to the front door, and he'd modified it for me to make it accessible so I can get in and pull the door out, give me access to the bedroom. We'd just make do. And then the NDIS came along, and part of the NDIS provides this scheme called the Specialist Disability Accommodation scheme. And I knew that for someone like me who was being cared for or supported by my family for accommodation, this was something that would suit me, because I've got high physical support needs. I rely on technology. I rely on 24/7 supports from Vitori and the team, and it's difficult to sort of paint the picture of what life is like at home. Everything is bigger and wider, and the house is sort of purpose built these days. I'm living in a specialist disability accommodation apartment on the Gold Coast. It has the assistive tech to be able to allow me to do things like open blinds and turn on the TV and control the aircon, and all the essential things in life that make life easier. And I think, the good old days of living in the community in unsafe housing and that sort of thing is now evolving. That's where I've been able to sort of sink my teeth into.
Yeah. And Vitori, I'd love to hear about where you came into the picture, and also hear about where you're from and your background, and then, how you two cross paths, and the kind of work you do with CareMatch as well.
Yeah, look, I was pretty fortunate, I suppose. I came into Perry's life 13 maybe years ago. I was in Sydney at the time, looking after a guy in a similar situation to Perry, spinal cord injury, and I just wanted to come back home. I went to school here on the Gold Coast, and I decided, it was time to come back. And fortunately enough, the same organisation that was looking after the gentleman in Sydney had Perry on their books, I suppose. And I made a few phone calls. We found out that we went to the same schools just by coincidence. Perry's younger brother was in a year below me at school, who I was aware of. And then my journey sort of started. And I've never really wanted to leave, and I enjoy the industry. I've been in enough meetings with Perry to sort of understand that it was a growing industry. A lot of help with Perry and his friends. I was able to establish CareMatch, and it's a growing business, and it keeps me on my toes, which is good.
And for people that aren't familiar with the kind of work that CareMatch does, can you describe like a day in the life of someone who works at CareMatch?
I suppose it varies from participant to participant, but essentially what we like to see ourselves specialising is the spinal cord injury sort of space, where we assist participants from their hospital journey transition back into the community. That means obviously trying to build a nursing team around them, obviously getting OTs, all that kind of stuff in place, and then obviously the most important part, and the thing that we try and specialise most in, is building a team of carers around the individuals so that they can interact and become part of the community as quickly as possible.
Yeah, wonderful. And when I was teeing up this interview with Brianna, one of your team that works with you, Perry, is that she was talking about this unique, I guess, concept around it. You have a lot of male carers or people in your team. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, I've always sort of relate better with guys that similar interests. It makes the day-to-day chit-chat a bit easier when you can talk about the rugby scores of the week or whatever, And it's a personal thing, I guess, of horses for courses. Some people are totally different, but that works for me. So I have a great team of support workers that all have sort of similar backgrounds, similar interests, and they get along really well. And I guess for me, that makes it easier for the day-to-day things to happen. And then that allows me to do my thing as well. And I think that's what's important. Like, is once you have a strong support base for your care and personal needs, then you can go and do things yourself with your career and work. And I think that's important for people that are out there listening, that may have a disability and maybe thinking about getting into the workforce, that sort of stuff. You've really got to have a strong support team around you to enable you to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to happen because you're sort of relying on people to turn up to their work so that you can go to your work, and there's this flow-on effect. So you want to get it right from the outset before you try and bite off more than you can chew. Being able to do that, fortunately, to allow myself to do things like the Spinal Research Foundation, accessible homes these days. So I couldn't do it without these guys.
And what's it like, I guess, having a good supportive team around you as opposed to having to rely on family to do that, like, and allow family to be family and not carers? It must be a good feeling to let them, I guess, take that burden away.
Yeah, and I guess I was lucky that I've got a fairly, my family are amazing. They've been incredible for a long period of time. And I've been supported by my mum, who's been my sort of rock in terms of giving me guidance through my life. But she's also been very direct at the same time. And she was fairly clear from the outset that it wasn't her thing to be able to look after her male teenage son. She wasn't skilled in that area. And she said, that's going to have to be for you to take on, which I appreciate, because I look back now and I think, well, otherwise I would have sort of probably dilly-dallied between family and sports and all that kind of stuff. And I haven't done that. I've been sort of straight into the world of being supported by other people. And I fortunately have thrived in that situation. But it's taken a while to get to where I am. Don't get me wrong, it's been like plenty ups and downs, and towards night. Over the last 13 years, I've had plenty of teammates to the team. People come and go. So it does take fine-tuning. But, you need people who can be clear and direct.
And I can imagine, you're a rugby player, so you're not exactly a small unit, and your mum trying to provide that care when, when you're 19 wouldn't have gone down so well.
No, that's right. And all the guys that I work with these days have rugby backgrounds, so they have the physical ability to be able to move around, as well as the chat that helps day to day. So make the work environment more fun and a bit more lively.
Yeah. And so for anyone who's listening who's not familiar about the NDIS, so that's the National Disability Insurance Scheme, can you talk a bit about your experience with that? Like, have you felt like it's been a good thing? We hear a lot of bad press about it, and I'm a fan of Dylan Alcott, and I love how he tries to shine a positive light on the NDIS.
Yeah.
What's your experience been like since it's come on board, and I guess some of the triumphs and challenges that you've had with it?
Yeah, I mean, some days, and to be honest, disability feels like a dirty word because it gets thrown around in the community, and you leave the house and you think, am I going to get my head chopped off by some taxpayer out there that thinks that money's being wasted? And you read some of the stuff in the media and think, well, maybe I shouldn't follow the media. But it's been tough. Like, it has, to be honest. I love the NDIS. It's been a great change for my life. I must be honest, but it has been hard. The whole sort of rollout seems to have been a bit clunky, and it comes at the cost of people like myself who are in it because we feel responsible or bad that we're involved in it. And it hasn't been supported by the community as much as it could have been because there are some discrepancies around it. And if people out there aren't aware of those discrepancies, then you've only got to type in NDIS and see the news. So it is hard. Like, you do feel responsible, and you want to be a good taxpayer like everyone else and make your effort in the community. I think I've tried to do that regardless of the NDIS. I was, well engaged in the workforce before the NDIS. So you want to be a responsible citizen, but you want to make sure the NDIS works and it's got a future for people that come behind you. And that's where accessible homes comes in, because we try and support people in a housing model that means their shared supports can go further. And that's the beauty of what we're doing with the housing stuff, is that we're building housing that means that the NDIS goes further. And I like that. But it doesn't get enough credit. So, it's two different conversations, one about the NDIS being not sustainable, but there's this underworld of people like us in the industry that are doing good work, supporting people in a more efficient way, but we don't get the credit and praise that we should.
Yeah, and tell us a bit about Accessible Housing Australia. Like, where did the idea come from, and like, what does it do? Tell us, talk us through what it does for the community.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I was living in my brother's house that wasn't adequate, and then I heard about the NDIS, and inside the NDIS is this thing called Specialist Disability Accommodation. So Accessible Homes Australia build accommodation housing that is accessible. Pretty simple stuff. But inside the housing, or there's apartments, there's assistive tech, there's more turning space for big wheelchairs. There's automation that allows TV to be controlled by voice, or the blinds or the lights or anything that's electric. And it just makes my life easier. It makes life easier for my support team, because they don't have to drop everything to do something for me if they're doing something else. So I can have some independence as well. It's all these sort of beautiful things can benefit someone with a high disability. So we provide housing for people in similar situations to myself. We try and cluster those apartments or houses together so that people in our houses can share the support. We have 8 apartments on the Gold Coast of Palm Beach, for example. 7 of those apartments have tenants in them living with disability, using wheelchairs. And on site, we have a carer's apartment. And in that apartment, there's a carer who's on call for those people. And our tenants can share those supports. And this is a really efficient way of there being someone on site, but not in your face all day, and offering support to a range of people. And it's just a beautiful way for people to live freely in the community, close to community facilities, close to public transport, close to the beach, close to the shops, restaurants, cafes, all the things that anyone would want in their life. And we can do that for people with high physical support needs, and that's amazing. And it's a world first. Like, I don't think there's any other scheme like this in the world that's done like this as well as we've done it. There might be other countries doing it, but they're not doing it as well as us. And I'm biased, but we're the latest and the newest. And the way that we've been able to roll it out, I think, is groundbreaking. And Australians should be proud of it. We should be proud of the fact that we've got a taxpayer-funded scheme that has been able to change the lives of people that probably would have been living in a hospital or a nursing home or an unsafe Queenslander if they hadn't been for the SDA and the NDIS.
Yeah, it is a wonderful thing that you're doing, and the scheme in general around SDA. I just wish there was more and more houses. There's so many people that are finding it hard to find accessible housing. But Vitori, like, from a carer's perspective, having those cluster of apartments near each other, and talk us through that and how that's beneficial and some of the good things that you're seeing coming out of the scheme as well.
Yeah, well, look, obviously we were living in suburbia here on the Gold Coast before SDA came about, and now, as you're seeing before this interview started, the views that we do have and the location that we do now live in. I very much, live with Perry at times, and it's a much more pleasant place to turn up to work and have that environment around you to be able to access things and go out and enjoy what the Gold Coast has to offer. And, like Perry said, the place down in Palm Beach, a lot of those guys had never had anything anywhere near the beach or to the standard of what they're living in. And to see the smiles on their faces, it goes a long way. And it's a shame that obviously the housing market has priced a lot of units out of the SDA market, but unfortunately, they're all fortunate, I should say. They go into rural places so they can obviously spread their wings a little bit further and build housing in places like Rockhampton and Cairns, like I know Accessible Homes are doing. So it's a great scheme, and I think there should be more of it.
Yeah, definitely. And Perry, you mentioned a really important thing is that it's getting people out of hospitals and aged care facilities as well that don't necessarily need to be there if they've got accessible housing in a community and where they can re-engage in social lives, and re-engage in work and study as well.
Yeah, and this is where it gets tricky because the old state-based scheme in the health system are run by the states, and NDIS is now run by the feds. So there's a little bit of argy-bargy sometimes about how people get released and when they get released from hospital, where they get released to and who funds SDA and how it's all sort of pieced together. But we're crossing some of those bridges now in terms of being able to bring people out of hospital. But we can take pressure off the health system by providing better housing, and that's what's important for people to understand is that some people look at SDA and think, "Oh wow, that's too flash." Like you've got automated blinds and automated lights and all that. I don't have that in my house. But the thing is, it's so expensive to look after someone in my situation. It's more expensive in a hospital because you have a nurse looking after me instead of tools and his team of carers. So it's way more cost effective to get us back into the community, and it's way more cost effective to give me the assistive tech and all those things that make living so much easier than having expensive doctors and nurses running around after me. So it might seem counterintuitive, but the more SDA that we have, the better and the cheaper it'll be for the health system and the taxpayer at the end of the day. And all those things aside, there's a housing situation at the moment where people can't get affordable housing, can't get affordable rentals. So we need to do more and more of this. So the government's faced with a predicament at the moment to be able to sort of roll out more of this in more areas, as Tor's mentioned. We're looking at North Queensland to do this because it's affordable still to be able to go into those areas and do it. Maybe a different setting, maybe on the ground, and it's not apartments, maybe it's villas side by side or something along those lines, and support people in those regional areas. People in regional communities haven't had the sort of supports that they've needed over the years, and it sort of forced people with spinal cord injuries, particularly that I know, to move into the bigger cities because that's where you go and get better support. Well, we should be able to reverse that now and say we're going to roll it back into the regions. We're going to roll it back into those communities that haven't had those supports, and that's what the NDIS is offering, I suppose.
Yeah, and you talked a bit about cost effectiveness before and sustainability, and when you're building a house, you're building, you're using builders and trades, and you're engaging with property managers and all this type of stuff. So it's not so much just a one person exchange of money. It's actually building an economy around the person living with disability and their families as well.
Yeah, by clustering housing together, we can then cluster supports, and by going to those regional areas, we can build villas, say, on the ground, side by side, close proximity to each other, and then a company like Tor's company can come in and occupy the shared support apartment for the tenants, and then these apartments we have speakers in the roof so that Tor's carers can be called upon just by someone like myself, sort of talking to the speaker in the roof if I need someone urgently to come up and help me. So that's what's really beautiful about the scheme, is that someone doesn't have to be sitting in your house waiting for you to make a request to do something. They can be nearby, in a separate apartment or villa. We can call upon them when we need them, and then it's come out as needs be. And then by sort of living in close proximity, all those tenants then share that support cost. And then when you need to leave your villa or apartment to go out into the community and do your day-to-day activities, that's when you call upon your primary supports and day-to-day supports. And that's when you have your normal outings.
Yeah. And Vitori, Perry's team is full of rugby players. What is it about rugby players that are doing work in the disability sector as well, like actually attracting them to do this type of work?
Look, it's been a big part of my life, and I suppose my sporting communities are rugby teams, rugby clubs. And I suppose over the years I've had guys ask me, what do you do? And I tell them, and they obviously go, well, what's that? How do you do that? Essentially, it's looking after someone, right? And they're obviously a little bit turned off by it, but at the end of the day, they see how much fun I have. And it doesn't happen with every participant, don't get me wrong. But most of the guys that have spinal cord injuries that we've come across, they're young gentlemen that want to get back into the community, that want to go to the pub, want to catch up with their mates, and they don't want to go with people that are 40, 50 years old. They want to be able to take their support worker, have a joke, not take things too personally, have a few beers together, and then at the end of the day, you turn out being really good mates, just like my friend here, Perry. But that's the sort of attitude I've taken into it, and I encourage all the guys that I've introduced to our participants. That's the way you should be looking at it. And fortunately enough, it's worked out that way. So it's a genuine career if you want it to be. I've obviously been lucky to be able to turn it into a business, but again, that doesn't happen without hanging around with people like Perry and his company. So I've been really fortunate. It's been really good to me, but at the same time, I want to make sure that our standards remain high and everyone's doing the right thing and having a good time.
Yeah, it is an amazing thing. And in my work in the disability sector, is seeing guys come into the field. You don't see it as often as the females as well.
Yeah, and I was going to add to that as well. Like Todd's just said about the rugby background, and like it's the thing that brings us together as blokes is our sporting backgrounds and the rugby backgrounds. But I guess that's what brings businesses together sometimes anyway. Like it's probably more obvious because we're in this disability industry and it's new and it's sort of different in the disability sector. But I have my Spinal Research Foundation, and on that Spinal Research Foundation we have a board of directors, and those guys all have backgrounds in playing rugby together as well. It's not just that it's disability. I think that's sometimes gets overlooked, that the things that bring us together in work and play are universal, and we forget that sometimes. And the relationships we build in life are through those community networks with people anyway. So it's probably sometimes gets overlooked.
Yeah, and that's the beauty about sport, isn't it? It's about bringing us together and shared, interests and passions as well. And as you say, you can play it for a while, and then after that, you can still get together with the blokes and have a beer, and essentially working as a team through life, not just necessarily on the pitch. But Perry, I'd love to talk just quickly about the Perry Cross Spinal Research Foundation. You did mention that just briefly there. Talk us about how that came about and some of the good things that you're doing with the Research Foundation.
Spinal Research Foundation came before Accessible Homes. Some of the guys involved in the Spinal Research Foundation have helped me with Accessible Homes, and I guess that's where this ties together. But I set up the Spinal Research Foundation probably 15 years ago or something. Christopher Reeve was a Superman actor when I was a kid, and coincidentally, he had a spinal cord injury, and he was our sort of spokesperson and advocate for spinal research all over the world, really. Like, everyone knew who he was. He was a famous actor. Unfortunately, he passed away a long time ago now, and we lost our advocate for spinal research, and that was where I sort of got the initiative to set up my own research foundation, because we needed to continue the great work he'd set up and advocate for medical research. And I a strong believer that it's difficult for scientists and people in labs to go out and advocate in the community for research. It's got to happen from the people who need it. And so I have a group of people around me that help advocate for that medical research. We go out into the community and we talk about the need for research and the need to fund medical research. And amazingly, a fluke in the sense that on the Gold Coast we have a lab that's got some really incredible, amazing research happening. We take the stem cells out of the olfactory nerve in the nasal cavity and we purify those cells, then work on building nerve bridges that can be then transported into the spinal cord. And that's the amazing technology that we're working on funding human trials in next year. And it's remarkable that we live on the Gold Coast and that this research happens on the Gold Coast, and some pretty groundbreaking stuff. And the guy who was the instigator of some of this research was the 2017 Australian of the Year, Professor Alan K. Sims. So it's very well recognised, and we can't do enough to sort of sing its praises and support its work.
Yeah, it sounds really wonderful that you're doing this. And as you say, like a lot of the stuff that we do in life, if it's informed by lived experience, it can certainly go a long way to pushing the agenda further, as opposed to someone just advocating for it, but not really having walked in those shoes or things like that. So, yeah, it's a really wonderful thing that you're doing. I really enjoyed this conversation, fellas, and I'm really thankful that you've come along for the chat. But Perry, based on your experience and your life and everything that's happened, and if someone's out there listening today that maybe they've been impacted by a spinal cord injury, either directly or indirectly, maybe it's a friend or family or something like that, and they're really struggling to come to terms with it, based on your experience, what's some advice you could give to help them kind of work through that?
Yeah, I think the trick for me at a young age was to get focused and get passionate. They say our minds are very powerful. And I think our mind is like a magnifying glass. If you take a magnifying glass out into the sun and wave it all around, the magnifying glass has got no power. But if you take it out into the sun and you focus it on an object, it's got immense power. And get that focus right, it's got enough power to be able to burn. You can burn a piece of paper or a leaf, that sort of thing. So I think our mind is like that. It's only when you get focused that you have power, but you have to apply a bit of passion and you've got to apply a bit of enthusiasm. And we're lucky that, towards in industries that we're focused on, we're passionate about. And I think that's the key for people out there sort of maybe looking for something to get into. Do what you're focused on, do what you're passionate about. If you're not focused, get focused. If you're not passionate, get passionate.
Yeah, I love it. And Vitori, from your perspective, maybe someone's listening and they're thinking about getting into disability work, but they're not quite sure, particularly for any guys out there. From your experience, what advice could you give them to kind of push them into this direction and do some great work in the community?
Yeah, look, I think just give it a go. Like it's probably not something that most young males would think they'd get themselves into, but like I said before, you're hanging around your mates, you get to do some pretty amazing stuff, and you're making the new norm, I suppose, getting these guys out in the community so that people, they stop staring and they look straight past you. They don't look at the wheelchair. They see a normal bloke. He's sitting in a chair, no dramas. That's just the norm, and I think that's the way it should be. As Perry said, like I maybe wasn't passionate about this industry when I first started, but I certainly am now. I really enjoy it. It obviously it's catapulted care match to where it is now today, and without this guy's help beside me in a chair, who's now the norm to me, it wouldn't be where it is. So it's a great industry to be involved in, and I have a great time doing it.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. Now, lads, I'll put the links into the show notes of all your businesses and the foundation and all that type of stuff as well, so people can access that. But I like to finish off each episode with you guys plugging something that makes you feel good. It's kind of a bit of a pay it forward, like are you watching something on TV or listening to something or reading something or doing something in your day-to-day life that makes you feel good that other people can tune into as well?
Look, we have this funny thing in our team here. We do the daily quiz in the Australian newspaper. We started doing it during lockdown because we were obviously locked down and we were doing a lot of reading and stuff. But the daily quiz, it's tough. It's very hard, but it keeps your mind sort of going in a sense. Like it keeps you thinking about day-to-day sort of news and a bit of history in there as well. Just things that are relevant in the community. It keeps you thinking about things that aren't just in your world, other people's worlds. So, that's one little thing we do.
Love it. Perry, Vitori, thanks so much for your time. I've really enjoyed our chat, and I wish you all the best for the future. And I look forward to following you along the journey. I'll be on your socials very soon. I've already started linking in with some of that stuff. So, thanks so much for your time and sharing your journeys.
Likewise.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it, mate.
Cheers.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.